We want to welcome you all today at Empowering Pastors and Leaders. It's not just pastors, but also leaders. If you're a pastor, you should be a leader. And so it's important that we recognize there are certain principles that are necessary to propel us forward in what God's plan is for our lives. And you only know what you know. Turn to someone and say, you only know what you know. The problem with only knowing what you know, it might not be enough. So that's why we learn. That's why we grow. That's why we gain knowledge. And when we gain knowledge, then we're able to make decisions properly. We're able to move properly with understanding. And so today I want to start a topic. It's going to be a 2-week topic, and it's going to be on I'm ready to go, or am I? And there are a lot of folks that get prophetic words, a lot of folks that have vision in their heart, they have goals in their lives, and they are ready to conquer the world. But are they really ready? That's what we want to talk about or start talking about today. You see, true leaders rarely start at the top. Usually somebody that starts at the top is toppled quick. Does anybody know what toppled means? It means they fall down quickly. So many people who start off way on top end up failing miserably. Because if you're going to be a great leader, you have to recognize there's something called process. Process is uncomfortable. Because I had somebody say to me once, well, you know, Pastor, I'm ready. And I said, I don't think you're ready. Well, they said, well, you don't know, do you? And I said, kinda. Because at that person, once they start taking that posture, that it doesn't matter what you say, you can't win. And the problem with that is all you can do is be there to pick them up when they fall. Because truthfully, there are a lot of folks that believe they're ready, but they're not. There are a lot of folks that have great vision, and it's been spoken by God, and it's real. And one day, it could genuinely happen. Just because something is prophesied does not mean it's going to happen. Just because somebody has a burning in their heart to accomplish something does not mean it's going to be accomplished. So what is the deciding factor of that? The deciding factor isn't God. The deciding factor is you and your willingness to submit until you're ready. And you'll find that many leaders don't want to do that. They just get that chutzpah, I know more. Have you ever been, well, yeah, we do. And we have a lot of interns in the room. My children at the age of 17 and 18, maybe even down to 14, they all knew more than I did, and I was the parent. I was just the dumb kid on the block. And many times when you're at an age where you have a lot of drive and you have a lot of passion and you have a lot of vision and you have a lot of, things you want to accomplish, many people are unwilling to listen to those that are wiser than they are because the wiser just don't realize what they need to do. In fact, I remember a kid in Bible college, he quit 1 week before graduation because the world was ready for him. And I want you to realize that the world is never ready for you. And I want you to recognize the world is not merciful to you. That leadership is never a mercy-filled adventure. So to be a true leader means you must be willing to submit to the process of development. And if you're not going to be willing to submit to the process of development, then you're not going to learn the lessons you need to learn to be prepared for the wounds that are going to come your way. Whether you're going to be running a business that is secular or whether you're going to be running a ministry that is supposed to be Christian, it is absolute foolishness to think that you're not going to get decimated more than once. You're going to have people hurt you. You're going to have people lie about you. You're going to have people come against you. Because in leadership, whenever you're at the top, remember where the buck stops. The buck don't ever stop at the bottom. The buck stops only at the top. So everything that happens in your life, in your ministry, in your leadership capability, ultimately becomes your fault. And it's your fault because you're the leader. So if you haven't gone through the lessons and the junk that bring you understanding of how to deal with certain things, then you can rise to the top quickly, but you'll fall just as quickly. That's why it's not always a great compliment to see a church go from 0 to 500. Now, it's not that growth shouldn't happen. If there is no growth, then there is an issue. But growth that happens exponentially to where there could be an implosion, which means your infrastructure is not ready. And if you're going to be a leader, guess who the infrastructure is? You. It's not what you're offering. It's not what you're presenting. That's the infrastructure. It's not even the structure of the business. The infrastructure is the leader. Everything rises and falls on the leader. So when people think, and I've had many over the years, have said to me, I'm ready to go. And I said, no, you're not. Some have listened, some have not. The ones that have not listened have many times crashed and burned. And the problem with that is, if you're a leader and you crash and burn, then as a leader, remember, you're not a leader unless you have followers. If you have followers and you're not ready and you crash and burn, then your followers crash and burn. It's not about you anymore. Being a great leader means it's no longer selfishness. Being a great leader means it's no longer about your happiness. Being a great leader means it's no longer about whether you're pleased or not pleased. It's about building people. Leadership is developing people around you. And you as a leader, your greatest success is making other people successful. That is what a true leader does. It is not about them being under the microscope, or I should say, under the highlights. So, if you are going to be a great leader, you've got to recognize that you have to go through a process before you are elevated to a level to where God is going to trust you with a lot of people. If you can't be trusted with a little, you'll never be trusted with much. And this process is uncomfortable and takes time. Well, I'm ready. Nope, you're not. Well, I can do it. No, you really can't. You can maybe show something, but not sustain something. Remember, true leadership is not just about you doing something. It's about you being able to sustain something. Scripturally, that is very powerful. In the book of John, you have not chosen me, but I have chosen you. Remember the rest of the verse? And have ordained you to go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain. Sustained success means the leader has gone through the process. So a leader not willing to go through process is one that's going to cause a lot of wounds in other people. But if you get so driven that you want to accomplish it, that you are unwilling to submit to the process, then you're going to go through pain that you were not actually on the docket for. What do I mean by that? There are people that cause their own pain. Listen, in leadership, you're going to get pain. In leadership, it is going to be difficult. In leadership, you're going to have people come against you. In leadership, it's going to be in a different, what's the word I'm looking for? It is going to be painful enough. Don't cause it yourself. But what happens is when you're not taking care of yourself, or you're not submitting and you're not yielding and you're not going through process, then what's going to occur is you're going to be an individual that's going to cause your own pain that you were not supposed to experience. I've had people say to me, which is an absolute foolish statement, well, I'm the kind of person that just has to learn the hard way. Well, that's just dumb. Well, that's just the way I am. No, it's not the way you are. It's the way you want to be. Because a great leader is not one that doesn't experience pain. A great leader is one that should experience the least amount of pain, because what they've learned is how to learn from somebody else. That's called wisdom. But if you're unwilling to submit to the process, then you're going to have to experience pain that is not something that you were called to do. Now let's talk about time. Time is horrible. We don't have enough time. Listen, you're still breathing, you got time. Noah, God spoke to him very clearly. Build me an arky out of gopher wood. I need you to build this ark to save the world. It took him 75 years. Well, I got the vision, I'm ready. Well, you know, the prophet prophesied. I'm ready. No. Just because you were called does not mean it's time for the launch. Just because you have the direction doesn't mean it's time to sprint to the final destination. There's a pacing that has to occur so that you can learn the lessons necessary to be able to be a sustained success. Abraham traveled and really did not know even where he was going. Moses, 40 years in the desert. Elisha, he had to wash Elijah's feet and carry around his stuff. He had to call, but it didn't mean it was his time. How about David? David was anointed. David killed the giant, and he was anointed to be king over Israel way before the killing of the giant, yet it was almost 20 years before he became the king. So here we are. We've got to recognize that it's exciting to have the drive, but you've got to be willing to submit to the process so that you can have a sustained success and be a long-term leader, not the shooting star, but a son. How about the disciples? Jesus spent day and night with them for 3.5 years. How about Paul? He spent 3 years in the desert of Arabia with Jesus. Nothing is quick. Now, I do believe in the last days there'll be what we call a meditata work, which will be a sped up of time to move quickly because God is bringing in an end-time harvest. But the challenge is when people want to do the tackling before they've learned how to tackle, they could break their neck. So the necessity to submit to time is something that is absolutely necessary. And you have got to be the person that's willing to say, okay, I've got the vision, I've got the direction, I know what God wants me to do, but to remind yourself that you might have got that direction on page 1, but God doesn't need you there till page 10. I am a different person today than I was 10 years ago. I've changed. In fact, I was talking to Miss Carla, and we were talking about me, which is uncomfortable. But from 2.5 to 3 years ago, actually it's been 4 years, she said, you are a different person than you were 4 years ago. In that, I've experienced great turmoil. Turmoil from Judas kisses, turmoil from government, turmoil from threats, turmoil from sickness, turmoil from death. It shaped me. Today, I can handle far more than I could have 4 years ago. And if I would be trusted with what I need, what I'm going to do now, 4 years ago, I might not have been able to sustain the success. I wouldn't have had the strength that God needed to install and insert in my spirit man. I wouldn't have had the wisdom that was necessary. I wouldn't have the long-term stamina that will be required. So this process is something that never stops. Actually, turn to someone and say, the process never stops. What a bummer. At some point in time, you always feel like, I've made it. But Paul was clear about that. I have finished the race. But he said he fought a good fight. You don't finish until you cross over into eternity. You don't stop learning until you're fully maturated, which means now you're going to be with Christ. We've all heard of John Maxwell in one of his books. It was talking about his dad, and his dad came to visit John Maxwell, and he was in his 70s. And when he came to visit, he brought in his briefcase and opened it up, and there was a book in there. And his dad had been retired for many years. And John Maxwell looked at him and said, Dad, what's that book in there? It's a leadership book. He goes, son, you can never stop learning. So we're always in that process. We're always in the maturation. We're always in the developmental stage. That is not the problem. The problem is when somebody thinks they're ready to launch and it's not their time yet. When that comes into our lives, we've got to make sure we ask ourselves, do I have somebody in my life who will be honest with me? Do I have somebody in my life who can speak frankly to me? Do I have a friend or a circle of influence that only agree with me, or somebody that is willing to be honest enough with me to tell me that I'm not ready? Am I submitted to an authority that if they say no, it means no? I've told the story before, but I remember on a Sunday morning, a guest came to our church and sat on the front row, right over there, sat on the front row of the church. After service, he approached me and he said, Pastor, my name is so-and-so, and God has called me to start a new work in Elmira, and I just was wondering if you would have to have 50 chairs you'd be willing to donate to us as we're launching the church. So the very first question I asked him was, well, who's your pastor? And he gave me the name of a local pastor. And I said, so your pastor is sending you out? He said, no. I went to him and I said, you know, I'm ready. God told me I'm ready and I'm ready to do it. And the pastor told me, not yet. But I don't care what the pastor says because I know I'm ready. And I looked at him and I said, really? That's really good rebellion. That's really not the words I said. I was far more blunt than that I won't be here. And I told him, I said, listen now, I'll have nothing to do with you. Because if you can't submit to the authority that will have to launch you, then who will you ever submit to? And if you're a spiritual authority, or even let's just say you're opening a business and you have a business mentor and they're telling you you're not ready, yet you don't care to listen to them, then I'm telling you now you're going to step out of process, and it's going to either cost you a lot of money because you're going to lose it with business, and or you're going to cost a lot of people wounds because you're a pastor or a leader that's going to do something out of order. And when you're out of order, God can't bless that. And when God can't bless that, you will always get followers. Come on now. Somebody's always going to follow you. Some people will follow you all the way to hell. But it don't mean you're a good director, because hell is hot. So there's the necessity to make sure that you are going to be a leader who has wisdom enough to stay in process and willing enough to say, listen, I don't even agree with you, but because I trust you as my leader, I am going to, if you say no, I'm going to say, okay, I'll wait. Now that takes a lot of trust. But the issue is, we live in a very untrustworthy world. And sadly enough, we live in a world that's saturated with rebellion. What is rebellion? Well, the Bible says rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. Rebellion is saying, I don't care what you say as my authority, I'm going to do whatever I want. There's outward rebellion that just simply says this, I don't care what you say, I'm doing what I want. That's what that guy did. And then there's one that's even worse than that called passive rebellion, where if your authority says no, you say okay, but inside you're still standing up. No matter what, rebellion is always bad because it shows that you cannot submit to an authority who sees your process. And a good leader wants to protect you so that you experience the least amount of pain. So if you're unwilling to submit to an authority whose job is to maturate you, protect you, and then propel you, then you will launch out into the deep and you will sink in the dark. And then you usually get mad. Well, I thought I was ready. Yeah, but you were told you weren't. Well, who does he think he is? Or who does she think she is? Well, you know what? You submitted to them. I'm talking even business. If you're a business person and you're not having a business mentor, somebody that's had more success than you, somebody that you're willing to listen to that says no, then you are just, well, you're foolish. And it's going to cause you pain that you weren't prepared for and you weren't supposed to experience. So there's a need to know this. We must stay submitted to an authority. Authority knows when it's time to climb or stand. Many launch out before they're released, believing they know more than the one who they submitted to. This will cause faction, confusion, and ultimately will cause wounds. And so there's a need to make sure that you're ready. There are many people that have come to me over the years and said, I'm ready. And you know they're not ready. You know there are lessons. I'll give you an example. I had somebody that we hired at one point in time, and they were a worship leader. And they were from a large city, and wow, spectacularly gifted. Their voice was phenomenal. But they were lacking something. What they were lacking in leadership was called love. They could do music. They were successful in running choirs, but they didn't love people. And I remember them sitting down one day in my office and looking me in the eyeball and saying, well, actually, I caught them on an accident. I caught them planning their leave. They had already acquired another job at another church and were sneakily sliding out. And I caught them. And I said, I need to talk to you. And I said, I need you to know it's not your time to leave. And the staff member looked at me and said, I'm more spiritual than you are. I know God better than you, and I understand the moving of the Holy Spirit better than you do. And I know it's time to go. And I said, it's not time to go. And they said, well, I'm already moving. Thank you. You know what why they were not ready to go? The very lesson that God sent them to learn, they never learned. And it was only one lesson: to love people. We had staff members that would duck in rooms when they walked down a room, or walk down the hallway. In the middle of a worship service, if something wasn't going right, that individual would turn and glare. The entire congregation's watching, and they would turn and glare and give that death stare, and then turn around with a smile. They never learned how to love people. Your gifts will not sustain you. Say it again. Your gifts will not sustain you. It's the process that sustains you. Because the process creates those learning lessons that are necessary to sustain success. Off they went, ministered to another church, were there for a little bit, then stepped out of ministry and have not been back in ministry since. Why? They never learned the one lesson: how to love people. You see, a lot of people think they're ready when they're not ready. And the challenge is, if you become the leader before you're ready, whatever a man sows, that shall he also reap. Which means you're going to get people that are going to turn around with you and say, I don't care what you say. You're going to create a culture of rebellion, a culture of individualism, not a culture of unity, not a culture that will propel the vision, but a culture that is set on I, which will always bring death to the vision. So today, as we're talking about this, you need to know that you have to ask yourself one basic question. Is there someone in my life, an authority that I have submitted to, that if they say no, I will trust them enough to listen to them so that I will not hurt me or other people? And if there is nobody, then you need to find somebody. I remember one time I had a staff member. Remember, I've been in ministry in this church 25 years. I've been in ministry for 35 years. There's very few things I haven't seen. And I had a staff member come up to me one day, and they were more mature age-wise. They were probably 60 plus years old and already pastored, but they came and submitted to the church and was working at the church. And I remember in a meeting, I said to them, I don't want you to do that. And they said, you can't tell me what to do. And I said, well, I'm the pastor of the church. And they said, but you're not my pastor. And I went, really? And I said, well, you have 1 week to find a pastor. So in 1 week, I said, who's your pastor? I kind of figured they would have gotten the hint. But not everybody gets good hints. Well, they still hadn't even found any pastor. And so I said, I will acquire your keys now. And I eliminated them from leadership. Why? Because they had nobody they were willing to submit to. I see this even later on, as process never ceases, of mature pastors who've been in ministry many, many years. And many of the people that were older than them have passed on to be with the Lord. And now they have nobody that they submit to, because those that they had submitted to have passed on to glory. And instead of getting somebody even a parallel alongside of them for someone to hold them accountable, they choose not to. And then they run amok. Why? Because if you have nobody that's willing to call you out on process, how are you able to see in the fog? If you are your only eyes, then your eyes are quite dim. You must have people around you who are going to help you discern whether you're ready for the next level or not. And if there is nobody, that is a greater concern. Because process is challenging. I remember my beginning of my process. I remember going to Bible college at Zion Bible Institute. I remember having to unload potatoes. I'm called to be a pastor. Actually, I never felt to be a pastor. I wanted to be an evangelist. I'm called to preach the gospel. I'm called to get out. The world needs me. Glory be to Jesus. And they had me unloading potatoes. They had me peeling potatoes. They had me cleaning. They had me scrubbing bathrooms, driving buses, picking up garbage, swinging a hammer, teaching gym classes, cleaning lights in the ceiling, painting buildings, vacuuming rugs, cleaning the outhouse. Oh, that's right. I worked in a church that had a 2-seater outhouse in Phillipston, Massachusetts. 2-seater with a bag of lime. Mowing lawns. If you're unwilling, here's a key for you. In process, if you're unwilling to be a servant, you can never be the leader. One of the main processes that God has to bring every great leader through is that you're willing to be the servant of all. Anybody seeking the pulpit is the one I will never allow behind the pulpit. Anybody wanting to preach is one that I don't ever let preach. Why? Because a lot of people want to be seen. A lot of people want to lead. A leader that can't follow is not a leader at all. And the process that God brings people through. I look at the internships. Came around the corner the other day, and you're out there, and you're picking the flower beds of weeds. I'm sure you weren't sitting there going, this is the greatest leadership training I could ever have. Some of you were washing the floors, and some of you were cleaning the toilets, and some of you were this, and some of you, I remember a few seasons ago, a child vomited in the children's room, and who cleaned it up? The interns. Oh my goodness, this is disgusting. I thought I was doing this to learn leadership. Exactly. Because if you can't serve, Jesus said, if you want to be the greatest, you must be the servant of all. And that's not just starting out. That's process that constantly must be regurgitated and rechewed and brought back to the palate and reminded of. Because it's easy to think you're something that you're not. Even myself. We are all here to serve. And the process of being the servant is the process of doing things you don't usually like to do. And when you're unwilling to serve, you have then designated yourself as being unwilling to lead. Because the process demands service. Or you actually start rising yourself up thinking you're something that you are not. So, process is not always fun. How can you clean, mow, paint, do all what you're asked? How does it actually gauge what you're going to become? Well, because, as Jesus said, Matthew 23:11, the greatest will be the servant. So yes, you were out picking weeds. Yes, you were cleaning toilets. Why in the world did you pay to do that? Why? Because we're training you to be the servant of all and to go through process and not to think you're something that you're not. When you learn that, you can start aspiring to be who God has called you to be. But until you're willing to serve, until you're willing to stay within the process, that must be uncomfortable, then you are literally canceling your leadership qualifications. And I don't care what your prophecies are. I don't care what business you want to start. The fact is, if you can't serve and stay in process, God can't trust you because he'll know you destroy not just yourself, but other people too. So we're going to pick up next week on part 2 of I'm Ready, or Are You? Thank you so much for watching. We encourage you to go on our website, www.michealspencerministries.com. Empowering Pastors is a ministry that will help build you, build your team, build God's kingdom so that you can reach as many people for Christ as possible. His kingdom come, his will be done. Thank you for watching today.
Thank you for tuning in to Empowering Pastors and Leaders with Dr. Micheal Spencer. If you're looking for helpful, life-changing, and empowering resources, Dr. Micheal Spencer's books are available here. Just click on the link below and get your copies today. Don't wait. These resources will bring about the change and success you've been looking for. If you'd like to know more about empowering pastors and leaders, please visit michealspencerministries.com. Also, if you'd like to become a partner with Empowering Pastors and Leaders, sign up online for the opportunity to do so. Thank you in advance for your financial support to help us reach into the U.S., Canada, Mexico, and Africa, and the different parts of the world. Empowering Pastors and Leaders will equip you to transform your personal life, ministry, or business to become the best leader God designed for you to be. Invest in yourself today and be the most effective leader you've ever been.